Buongiorno, as Brad Pitt's character said in Inglourious Bastards. Welcome to episode 275 of the Notcast. I would say welcome back if you've seen any previous ones. If you haven't, this will be your first foray into me talking about records I love, loathe, or am dimly aware of. Today is, I think, the 15th of June, 2023. There is no anniversary that this is lined up for. Instead, I'm talking about the Flaming Lips, I think, 7th album, 8th album, released in 1997 and 1999. Those albums come in a proliferation, in fact, a veritable smorgasbord of formats, and they include 1997's Zaireeka. Here is the original CD edition. 1999's the Soft Bulletin, the Soft Bulletin Companion, and the singles. Here we go: Race for the Prize and Waiting for Superman, which, when you put them all together, is actually a huge bunch of material. And as far as I'm concerned, this whole era, despite the fact that it has 3 singles and 3 albums in fact, all represents the same periods. The advance or enthusiasm for life as shown by amateurs recording material. So we have Zaireeka, which is at the bottom because that's how it's designed. We have the Soft Bulletin, which is at the top because that's how it's designed. We have a pink vinyl single here and a bunch of other ones from the... it really doesn't feel like this is 26 years ago now, 24 years ago. It really doesn't feel like it's that long. But then in my mind, I remember the day that Kurt Cobain's death was announced, and so therefore in my mind that's still relatively recent history on the grounds that I can remember it, which obviously isn't the case at all, because that's 30 years ago next year. Ye gads, what's been going on? How has time worked? Well, we're all time travellers, travelling 1 second per second forward in a linear fashion through time. And today I'm going to be talking about the Zaireeka album to start off with, and then the Soft Bulletin period afterwards. So this is Flaming Lips as Warner Brothers recording artists, coming off the back of their alleged hit single, She Don't Use Jelly. Not my favourite of their songs. And having moved into effectively a trio lineup with Steve Drozd, Wayne Coyne and Michael Ivins on bass, with Ronald Jones, the band's former guitarist, having moved out and rotated away from the group, which means that the band had an unusual position to be in. The grunge bubble had most definitely burst. And in that period, early 90s, lots and lots of bands were being signed by labels for huge amounts of money, trying to replicate on the success of Nirvana and thinking, if we sign, Presidents of the USA, Nickelback, Stain, Bush, Flaming Lips, if it's a band and it's American and it sounds vaguely rocky and it doesn't have, a name like, I don't know, Bust a Nut or something as your album title, because I think that was a Tesla album, for God's sake, fucking juveniles. If you don't have a ridiculous name that basically is just called Tits and Ass, you got signed as one of the grunge bands and offered a huge amount of money. And so the Flaming Lips had this experience, I think, like a lot of bands, of being in the grunge slipstream, although that wasn't really who they were or how they operated. And they had a fate as potential has-beens or one-hit wonders, very similar to Presidents of the United States with their song Lump, I think it's Lump, and was it Wales Hobo Humping Slow-Mo Babe and all that type of stuff. And instead they threw out the rule book. They couldn't tour because they didn't have a lineup that they could tour with, so they started performing what they called parking lot experiments, hence the t-shirt here, and on the back has a configuration. And the parking lot experiments, which started in 1997, was where the band had 40 cassette tapes and they gave 40 people copies of the tapes, and then they coordinated them together to play them a certain way. Now obviously I should have turned my shirt around and shown you what that looks like, but if I do that, it means I'll have to show you what I look like without a top on. So let's pause this, turn the shirt around, and then I'll show you how the parking lot experiments worked. But effectively, instead of touring, the band were playing cassette tapes and using the audience as effectively a mixing desk, playing and coordinating the cassettes in different orders. They called them parking lot experiments because sometimes they happened in parking lots with people using their car stereos. They also did a tour where they had members of the audience on the stage being an interactive part of the show. Pretty innovative, pretty unusual, probably as far removed from a standard conventional gig as I think you could ever possibly get. So let's turn the shirt around and I'll show you how it works. Let's pretend that it's always designed to look like that. So this is the parking lot experiment configuration on the t-shirts, and we have, I think, 40 numbers on there. Numbers 1 to 20 here, numbers 21 to number 40 upon here, with the 3 members of the band, Michael, Steve and Wayne, and they would coordinate almost like playing a symphony, and they'd go right numbers and then hold up numbers, and the numbers would play. And so if you were number 4, you press play, then you press stop, and if you were number 31, you press play and then you press stop. And then somehow that was all fitted, and then the audience watched it, and apparently it was good. I don't know, I don't even know what material they were playing during those, because they weren't really playing them, they were playing recordings of parts of songs, which tied in with the theme that we had for the album Zaireeka, which was released, by the way, on the 28th of October 1997. This version of Zaireeka, by the way, is on 4 LPs. It's the first vinyl edition of the record that was released, which came out for Record Store Day in 2014 on 4 slices of coloured vinyl. The CD version was the version that almost everybody owned and bought when it first came out. It was effectively 8 new songs recorded by the band, but they decided to try and shake it up a little bit because they were also recording another album at the same time. And they ended up recording something like 25 songs during this period, which ran from about mid-1997 through to around about February 1999 at Tarbox Studios, and writing and recording. And it saw a big change in the band's sound and the band's structure. So without Ronald playing guitar, they'd moved to probably what was then described as the nearest equivalent to kind of like a modern day version of Pet Sounds or Beach Boys. And this is where I really want to kind of, and I can't overemphasize this at all, is that effectively Steve Drozd, who joined the band, started off as their drummer, also could play bass, guitar, keyboard, sing. There wasn't much he couldn't do, and effectively almost became like the Johnny Marr of the group, the creative musical leader. Not to say that the other members of the band didn't have ideas or opinions, but was just bristling with ideas, and became very productive, very prolific, writing a lot of material, very interested in sonic experimentation and creating new and unusual sounds. So, for example, Zaireeka and also Soft Bulletin have a new kind of orchestrated, vast, sweeping sonic texture and palette, which you didn't have on the previous records, which is why, as far as I'm concerned, Zaireeka is where I really become a Flaming Lips fan, as opposed to somebody who kind of has some of their records and kind of likes them. This is where the band really stepped out of the shadow of anybody else and became themselves. You know, like that cliche where they said, this is the day that Donald Trump finally becomes president. Well, Zaireeka, this was the album where the Flaming Lips became the Flaming Lips, and absolutely nobody else whatsoever. So, inspired by these parking lot experiments, which was obviously the 40 cassettes played by 40 people, and the glory and shambolicness of those experiences, because each one of those cassettes and each one of those performances was either beyond or behind or slightly ahead of the beat. Zaireeka was intended to be experienced as effectively a quad mix, for which there was no actual stereo mix. So in ye olde days, quad mixes were quite popular. You have them on 8-track cassettes. You could rig up 4 speakers. You could have, you know, like a front left, front right, back left, back right. Now it's all 5.1 with your mini home cinema setups and stuff, and Zaireeka effectively was like a precursor to your 5.1 mixes. It was a quad mix that was presented on 4 separate discs. The idea being is that you'd rig up 4 separate CD players, and you press play, and each one, because you'd have to run across the room unless you had 4 people in the room that all press play at the same time, each one would be slightly out. No performance of the album, no listening to each of the 4 versions on the 4 speakers would ever be quite the same. And in fact, if you have audio mixing software, and I've done this, is you can feed in each one of the 4 channels, and you can remix and recreate the album as a whole, and you can line up everything so that it syncs absolutely perfectly. And it's yeah, it's a very good record. It's not amazing. It's very good, but it sounds like B-sides, and that sounds a bit cynical. It absolutely doesn't. It's just the songs aren't perhaps quite as good as the songs that appeared on the Soft Bulletin. So, since there were limited live performances due to the trio lineup, Zaireeka was effectively 4 times 2 stereo tracks, all recorded at the same time as the Soft Bulletin sessions, and released as a 4 CD set. They ran the numbers, and Warner Brothers said, no, this will not apply to your contract because it's so unusual and expensive. And they ran the numbers that they thought that the break-even point would be around about 12,000 sales if they sold it at the price in which they did. And they had pre-orders of 14,000, so the album paid for itself. Although by 2006 it had sold 26,000, shifted an extra 14,000 or so on the basis of the band's subsequent success with the Soft Bulletin, Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots, and At War with the Mystics. And effectively, the 7-album advance deal that they signed with Warner Brothers, this release did not contribute to that at all. Effectively, it was a series of B-sides that became a 4 CD album box set. Zaireeka, and this is the booklet that comes with the original CD release, is 8 songs long. Some of the songs do appear in full stereo mixes elsewhere, including the Soft Bulletin Companion, which I will mention, and it had, oh, hang on a minute, I put that booklet in upside down. So it has 8 songs on it, probably about 42 minutes long, and no doubt enterprising fans have put together versions of it that you can listen to on YouTube. It was a precursor to some of the Flaming Lips' more experimental release profiles, which they took and started in 2011, including one where you had to play the track on multiple open YouTube tabs, for example, for much the same approach. Zaireeka takes its name from the idea of a utopian place that doesn't really exist, like a symbol of anarchy and uncertainty, taking the Zaire from the People's Republic of Zaire, which is in Africa, and then a combination of a portmanteau. Portmanteau is a French word meaning 2 words stuck together. A portmanteau with the word Eureka, which kind of symbols a statement of joyous discovery, a moment of revelation. So it's this kind of idea that in the midst of all the chaos and madness and uncertainty is that you will find a fascinating and exciting new revelation around how this album works. Another way of looking at it is no version of this album, when you listen to the 4 CDs, ever works in quite the same way. So I downloaded a fan version of it where they put the 4 tracks together and burned it onto a CDR and stuck it into my player here. So if I wanted to listen to Zaireeka, I had the CD of it. But of course, I also have the 4 CDs to listen to. So there's a warning on the front of Zaireeka. It says this is a unique recording. These 8 compositions, not songs, compositions, are to be played using as many as 4 compact disc players and have synchronized start times. The recording also contains frequencies not normally heard on commercial recordings, and on rare occasions has caused the listener to become disorientated, which is a nice way of saying you're in for some weird shit. Strap yourself in. We're going for a ride. Now, Zaireeka, I think, probably symbolises a degree of creative uncertainty or constipation. So after grunge had ended, there was an element of going, well, what's my band going to do? What's my band going to sound like? Are we going to be like Def Leppard and we're going to do an album where we all pretend to have been sad truckers called Slang? Are we going to be going, I hope you enjoy our new direction, and starting a track called Jazz Odyssey, for example? And I think the way that the Flaming Lips approach that is that they sidestepped the whole thing and went for something slightly different, and instead just went weird. And of course, as Hunter S. Thompson said, when the going gets weird, the weirds turn pro. So this is the 2014 vinyl edition of Zaireeka. Difficult to get, difficult to listen to, and unless you've got 4 CDs or 4 LP, 4 albums, 4 record players, difficult to experience. Each one of the 4 discs is color coordinated. This is LP4, which is green, for example. Oh, hang on a second. It clearly hasn't been out of there for quite some time. In fact, I would go so far as to say whoever originally bought it possibly only played it once. I mean, what's this weird shit? Well, here we go. And then we have, I think this is probably LP1. Let's find out, shall we? Yep, LP1. Luckily, thanks to how weird all of their sleeve art is, I put this in upside down and I hadn't even noticed. So that's number 1. There. This will be number 2, I reckon. Let's open it and find out. It's a top loader. Yep, number 2 on red. And then let's go for number 3. I'm guessing this one's orange, actually, on the grounds that that's the dominant colour in the sleeve. Yeah, it's kind of yellowy there. And then, of course, LP number 4 there is red alongside a kind of one of those lovely booklety things that explains to you how the album works and what it does. Alongside, oh, and this is what I found in it as well, an interview with Wayne from the American Head era. So the parking lot experiments are detailed in here alongside some photographs, some things about exploding on its own inertia, instability, tape numbers, all that type of stuff. Effectively, it's a fascinating little record. I really like it, but it works better when you listen to all 4 component parts at the same time, and it works better if you've been able to find somebody that's mixed the whole thing together as one cohesive LP on YouTube, as opposed to weird quad mixes where, if you, let's say you play discs 1 and 3 or discs 2 and 4 or discs 1 and 4, there's a multitude of combinations around which you can experience Zaireeka. The best one is when you listen to all of them running at roughly the same time. The band did what they call a boombox tour. This t-shirt I'm wearing is from the boombox tour. I didn't see them on the boombox tour, by the way, just in case there's any ambiguity about it. I didn't see them on this tour because I didn't like them at this point. Better late than never, I think, is the official verdict there. And on the boombox tour, the band performed a number of songs, or I think performed is probably overstating it, had a number of songs that weren't on the LP, and those songs were a winter day car accident melody, altruism, or that's the crutch calling the devil black, heralding the better ego, realizing the speed of life, schizophrenic service, and should we keep the severed head awake, which later turned into a track called Sleeping on the Roof, which appears on a later LP. I think it appears on the Soft Bulletin. And after that, then the band decided probably best to not be too weird forever and actually go back to the old-fashioned approach of writing and recording perhaps more accessible material, which resulted in the release of, on the 17th of May 1999, what is widely regarded as one of the band's best LPs, the Soft Bulletin, which comes in a number of configurations and a number of formats. There are 3 separate track listings and editions for the Soft Bulletin, depending upon which edition you have and which country you buy it in. There's a British CD, which has an exclusive track, which I think is called Bugging, and the American CD, which has an exclusive track, which I think is the Spider Bite song. And then there's the double LP edition as well, which features most of the songs, but again has a slightly different running order as well. So there's no one actual definitive running order for the album, the Soft Bulletin. What I will say is this is, in my opinion, one of their best LPs. It's far more direct, it's far more straightforward, it goes straight to the heart of the matter. In the liner notes to the 2006 5.1 DVD edition here, effectively the band say, well, we were writing songs and writing material, and they suddenly just seemed to have 2 completely distinct personalities around it. Very song-based material, which was recorded and released later as the Soft Bulletin, and weirder, stranger stuff, which became Zaireeka, which included songs like Big Old Bug Is the Baby Now, which is a bizarre song to say the least. So the US version of the album is different from the UK version. This is the 1999 UK version, which I bought from Swordfish Records in Birmingham, which is where I grew up. Not in Swordfish Records, although I did spend a lot of time there. Birmingham, which is where I grew up. As you can probably tell by the accents, although if you're not from the UK, you might think all accents are roughly the same. They're not. Even somewhere like the distance between Wolverhampton, Walsall, Birmingham and Coventry, the difference in accents is absolutely huge, even though the distance travelled is sometimes as short as 12 miles. The UK version of the album has standard mixes of all the tracks on, alongside a track called Slow Motion, I think, which is on there, and it has remixes at the end of Race for the Prize, Waiting for Superman, and Bugging, which are called Mockround mixes. Let me just quickly check. Yep, Slow Motion is track 4 here on the UK CD. On the vinyl edition, Slow Motion does not appear. Instead, we have Bugging on there in its original version. In the American CD edition, Bugging is the original CD had a promotional remix version of Bugging on there as well. And the American version has different mixes of Race for the Prize, Bugging, Waiting for a Superman, and the Spider Bite song on it. There were a couple of singles that released from the album. The first one, which opened every Flaming Lips show I have seen, is Race for the Prize. Here are the 2 UK CD singles of the track, and it features alternative versions of Riding to Work in the Year 2025 and 35,000 Feet of Despair from Zaireeka. This one also features alternate mixes of those tracks from CD1, this one from CD2, primarily because though Zaireeka wasn't released in the UK, you had to import it, which is kind of weird, but so be it. And then there was a second single that was released from the album. This one is again Waiting for the Superman. This features the versions from CD3 and CD4, and what you can see is again the cover art is an inverse of each other, and they also feature a really unusual and nifty CD design, what was called a mini CD. So the CD itself here is kind of transparent, and you can see that the cover art is kind of printed onto the outside of the silver section on clear plastic. The silver section containing only 20 minutes of music, thanks to the BFI chart rules. And there you go. These 2 songs, Race for the Prize and Waiting for a Superman, are, in my opinion, amongst the finest ones that the Flaming Lips ever released. The song itself, Race for the Prize, is a song that was running frequently through my mind during COVID 3 years ago, although it feels like it's much longer than 3 years ago, and it also feels like it's yesterday. Race for the Prize is a song about 2 scientists racing for the battle to save mankind, hope against hope, trying to find a cure with their wives and children, all supporting them. And during the midst of COVID, and I had a number of friends that worked in medicine, for example, who were really doing incredible things, treating and helping people and help seeing people and trying to bring them back to health and healing people, or not, as the case might have been, but doing everything they could, so when the world needed them, they were there. And you know, we clapped them on the doorsteps and we banged our pots and pans, and our government shamefully decided that they weren't worth being paid the same amount of money as they had been many years previously. There is a strike at the moment in the NHS with some of the medical people. It's been a long time since I've worked for the NHS, 15 years now. I can't remember exactly who's doing what, but the actual real world terms value of the salaries that are paid to people that work in medicine, they literally hold your lives in their hands, has depleted by something like 15 to 20% due to not keeping track with inflation since 2008. And that is why they are striking. They are heroes, and we should applaud them and reward them, because if you're holding someone's life in your hands, and if you're operating at the cutting edge of medicine and technology and saving people's lives, you should be able to pay your bills at the end of the month. That's my opinion. So these 2 scientists are racing for the cure that is the prize, to battling to save mankind. And Race for the Prize ran through my head on a daily basis in the midst of COVID. This song about ambition and science and technology, and how man doesn't create, he discovers, and how scientists and nurses and researchers were trying to find the answers, trying to find the cure that would save mankind from the plague that had besieged us in 2020 and 2021, and to a latter extent 22 and so on. It's a great record, and each one of the songs has a strong melodic basis. The music is very cinematic in scope. The production is absolutely immaculate. Steve Drozd is doing this wonderful thing where he's taking old classic synthesizers and detuning them or futzing with the technology and the electricity outputs to try and make it sound like, instead of it being one guy playing it on a keyboard, that it's an orchestra, but it has this weird otherworldly sound that goes through to it. It became part of the signature of the Flaming Lips sound, is this sound where it feels like it could be an orchestra, but there's something slightly wrong, something slightly synthetic about it. And it becomes absolutely fascinating to experience that sound, to hear, obviously limited by money, because you can't afford to record an orchestra. Although, of course, later on in 2016, the band did perform some live shows with an orchestra and released it as a live album at that point, which I will talk about when we get to that particular album, talking about the Flaming Lips. But in the meantime, it feels like it's the band producing material that is where at last, the scope of their ambition is able to be matched by the reach and the grasp of what they're doing. So this is, I think, the first time alongside Zaireeka where the band's ambition, which is absolutely enormous, the ability to seize the day and to make the most of every second that you have, and to be able to try and aim for the stars every day, and eventually, if you aim for the stars long enough, you might just hit them. This is the bit where actually through the execution of the material, they're starting to be able to reach the ambition that they've always had. Especially when you listen to a lot of bands and their early material, you kind of think, you guys are trying and you can't quite reach that far. They're aiming for the moon and maybe hitting the trees. This is the time where the band, they're aiming for the moon, and you kind of sit there and you listen to the album and you go, I think they could do it. I think they could get there. And it's wonderful to see a band where they're able to reach the ambition that they've got, and their ambitions are absolutely enormous. Because remember, we only get one pass through this life. We only live each day once. We only get the opportunity to live 2023 once. So why would you want to spend your time trying to be an older version of who you once were? Which is why, although I've seen some incredible shows on the Album in Full tours, I'm not a huge fan of Album in Full tours unless that's the album that's just come out. If I wanted to see the band play Yoshimi Battles the Pink Robots in full, I should have seen them more in 2002, 2003. To see them in 2023 and to do it, sure, it would no doubt be a wonderful experience, but I'd want music that speaks to me now, about now, and what's happening now, because we only get one chance to live now. I don't want someone to go, do you remember what it was like 20 years ago? I kind of go, well, I had a full head of hair and no money, whereas now I've got no hair and I haven't got a full head of money. Those kind of things. It doesn't seem, I want music that now talks to me about what it is to be alive today, what it is to live in a world that's living with the aftershocks of an enormous pandemic, an attempted insurrection, political upheaval, world war. These are times where great art great music can be made. You think about the world political situation at the moment, not going to lie to you, pretty scary, as Nirvana has it. And if they were able to write a song that somehow captured the moment in the way that, say, Nirvana's Nevermind captured the moment, or Bob Dylan captured the moment in 1966, and to be able to capture the upheavals of the times, the spirit of the moment, I would much rather have a record that captures 2023 than a record that tries to recreate what 2022 or 2003 was. You could probably say, actually, UK Grim by Sleaford Mods probably captures 2023 better than any band trying to recreate an album from 30 or 40 years ago, live on stage. I'm not really a fan of Sleaford mods these days. I've seen them. I've got a couple of the CDs. They're okay. They're just kind of like a furious kind of budget buckfast Pet Shop Boys, really. And my mum said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I won't say anything at all. It's probably the best way to describe it. So that's track one, Race for the Prize. It's followed up by A Spoonful Weighs a Ton. And I have a theory about this song, which is A Spoonful Weighs a Ton. Track two could actually kind of take a hint from that old track, The Loving Spoonful, or the band The Loving Spoonful, which of course is about a male bodily fluid. You stay classy there, and about the impact that spoonful would have. It got a 2012 Record Store Day 7-inch release, which Warner Brothers were very keen on doing these, which are strange and unusual releases, which is where you had the original artist on one side and the artist doing a cover version on the other side. So, for example, David Bowie and Tom Verlaine doing Kingdom Come. The Flaming Lips version of Spoonful Weighs a Ton. And on the B-side, Mastodon. Great name for a band, great name for a social network there on a 7-inch single. And it works, very, very well. Although this, of course, I bought it because I like Flaming Lips, and I didn't buy it because I didn't know what A Spoonful Weighs a Ton sounds like. There comes a point where you kind of go, actually, is this, music, or is this merchandising? Whereas Flaming Lips were, and are, and have been more recently, kind of very keen on presenting their music as a tangible, touchable, kind of portable, mass-produced work of art, as opposed to just a music delivery system. And we also have The Spark That Bled, track 3. Track 4 on the UK CD is Slow Motion, which is not on the other versions of the album, although, well, it wasn't on the original American CD, although the 2006 version does feature it, where they standardised the track listing, much like they standardised the Beatles albums when they all moved over to CD in 1987. And we have What Is the Light, The Observer, and then track 7, Waiting for a Superman, which to me is one of the best ballads of all time. It has this wonderful, beautiful lyric around, I asked you a question and I didn't wait for you to reply. And to me, those opening two lyrics always remind me of moments in relationships where perhaps you're not sure if the other person feels the way that you do about something. And you ask them a question, and actually it's quite brave if you're in a relationship and you ask a question and you're not sure if what the answer is going to be. Sometimes you tell somebody that you have really strong feelings about them, you say those 3 words, and you don't always know if they're going to say them back, and you have to be honest about your feelings, but at the same point it's really scary to go out there into the dark and to hope that someone's going to catch you when you jump. It doesn't always happen, of course, and then you can feel a bit stupid when you've told somebody you've got feelings about them and they don't feel the same way. So there's that moment, that pause, one of the most terrifying kind of periods of time in any life, actually, is that moment where you ask somebody a question or you say something and then you have to wait for the answer to come back and you don't quite know what the answer is going to be. There's been a couple of occasions where I had really strong feelings about people, and the fear of them perhaps not reciprocating it has made me not say something that I felt, or not acted upon something that I felt. It's a real shame, that, but it's better to have had that feeling than to not have, any day of the week and any week of the year, of course. But Waiting for a Superman, it's just a gorgeous song, just delicate, understated, and sometimes less is more and more is less. We have track 8, Suddenly Everything Has Changed. 9, The Gash, which is this huge, lovely, boisterous instrumental that almost sounds like the man. They're absolutely just in love with the possibilities of the sound and the noise, and they're just, sat there just going, fuck it, we're going for it. And if we look ridiculous, at least we know that ridicule is nothing to be afraid of, and it is better to aim for the stars and miss than to aim for the floor and hit. And we also then have Feeling Yourself Disintegrate, Sleeping on the Roof, and then on the UK CD, tracks 12 and 13 are single mixes of Race for the Prize and Waiting for a Superman, and then track 14 is the remix of Bugging, because the original mix of Bugging didn't get a release on CD until you got the 5.1 mix of the album that came out in 2006. We have the vinyl edition of the LP, which again has a different track listing, 13 songs now. So this version doesn't feature, actually it features every track of the 13, but it doesn't feature the remixes of Race for the Prize or Waiting for a Superman. It features the 13 tracks, the 13 original songs that appear on the combination of the US and UK versions of the LP. This is a 2011 repressing of the album. It comes with an inner sleeve on, I think this is standard black vinyl actually, but apart from the copyright dates, it's as far as I can tell, and the fact that it's on 2 LPs, it's the same as the original release. So just to kind of point out again, we have track 1, Race for the Prize, which is that obviously that lyric around trying to solve and cure a huge disease. The Spark That Bled, track 2, is a lyric that has become very influential upon Flaming Lips stage shows. The idea that not only is the sound kind of a replication of a huge grand vista, the stage shows are this enormous spectacle of presentation and frankly audacious, ballsy, gutsy, just go for broken nuts, kind of with huge inflatables and glitter and lasers and everything that goes with it. If nothing else, you could just watch a Flaming Lips show and be completely deaf and just be entertained by just how crazy that show is. But it does feature the line, "I accidentally touched my head and noticed that I had been bleeding." And that's something that is reflected in a lot of their stage shows, is the idea of theatrics, the idea of using stage blood, and it kind of a huge chunk of it comes from that particular line there. And then we have, hang on a second, it's The Spoonful Weighs a Ton, the Spider Bite song, which is this wonderful stop-start song about Steve apparently getting a spider bite, which I think, according to the documentary Fearless Freaks, which is, I guess it's about there up on my shelves behind me, is actually around an infection caused by intravenous drug use. Naughty, naughty, don't do it. Once Steve quit drugs, he started writing a heck of a lot more songs. And then we had Bugging and What Is the Light to the Observer, which is this long, mellow kind of song that the band used to end shows, and at this point kind of usher people out. LP2 has Waiting for a Superman. I asked you a question, but I didn't need you to reply. Is it getting heavy? And then I realised I thought it was already as heavy as it could be. This is a good time for a Superman to lift the sun into the sky. It's a lovely song. It really, really is. And yeah, there you go. That's the LP. That's all 13 songs. Now I could do this deep and heavy kind of analysis of what's inside every lyric, but frankly, that's not where I am. When I listen to the Soft Bulletin, I'm experiencing a completely, fully realised work of art, a record that isn't just lyrical, but a record that's kind of lyrical and poetic from a sonic perspective, that really tells a story around feelings and emotions and what it is to be alive at that point in time, sitting right on the cusp of the year 2000 and everything that was going to go with it, with all the uncertainty that was going to follow around the Manelian bug. You know, the idea that somehow all the computers were going to stop working and no one was going to be able to get out any cash or anything that went through with that. And it was a really strange time to be alive, actually, full stop. So I saw the band on this tour. They played the Glastonbury Festival in June 2000. I have no memory or recollection of it whatsoever now. I just know I was there. because I'd been up for 4 days solid, as I mentioned in my previous episode when I talked about Pet Shop Boys at Glastonbury, and I hadn't really eaten very much, and I wasn't really looking after myself. I was just coming into the last week of being 26 years old. When you're 26, you think not only are you invincible and that you're going to live forever, but also that you can do anything you like and you can get away with it, because the arc of consequence hasn't come and landed at your doorstep yet. So I have no memory of seeing the band on this tour whatsoever, and I'd like to blame drugs. No, actually I'd like to blame drink for that, because I've never taken drugs, despite what you might think. Because where I worked at the time had a random drug testing policy, and so taking drugs would be a very bad idea, and no job is worth losing just over taking some drugs. Although, to be fair, some of the people who worked there were some of the biggest gainers in the world. 2006 saw the release of the 5.1 version of Soft Bulletin, but at the same time, around about the year 2000, the band released a handmade promotional CD that they distributed on a mailing list called the Soft Bulletin Companion, that was also later supplemented with the Soft Bulletin Companion Part 2, and Part 2 featured radio sessions. This is the later 2021, I think, 2021 Record Store Day version of the Soft Bulletin Companion, which had a release replicating the original stickered CDR, and the vinyl release, this version from Record Store Day, I think on silver vinyl actually, which was a handmade promo-only compilation, which according to the booklet says Soft Bulletin outtakes, stereo versions of Zaireeka tracks, and unreleased songs from the era. So this one has 13 songs on. It has stereo mixes of 30,000 Feet of Despair and Riding to Work in the year 2025, as well as A Machine in India. Okay, I'll admit I don't really understand. And the previously unreleased tracks, The Captain, the original mix of Bugging, and 1,000 Foot Hands. Disc 2 has a track called Satellite of You, an early mix of the Spider Bite song, an early mix of Slow Motion, and a final mix of 1,000 Foot Hands, Little Hands, and The Big Old Bug is the New Baby Now, getting a stereo release. So effectively the Soft Bulletin Companion is kind of like a B-sides disc that goes alongside the Soft Bulletin, although thanks to the vagaries of record companies and all the associated bollocks that goes with it, this release was only a CDR with a stickered sleeve, and later kind of put up for download on the Flaming Lips forum, which is where I got it from at the time I downloaded it. This CD here, the 2021 version of the Soft Bulletin Companion, features all of the songs on a lovely shiny CD, and is about £1.99 on Amazon, because it really doesn't look like it's worth paying any more for, and it replicates the sticker, which aside from I think the copyright details on here is pretty much the same thing that they had at the time. 31st of January 2006 saw the release of the 5.1 DVD edition of the Soft Bulletin. Two discs, a like composite new version of the album, which features 13 songs on, broadly replicating everything but without the remixes of Race for the Prize and Waiting for a Superman, and then the DVD edition here, which features the album in 5.1 plus 2 videos, studio recordings of 1,000 Foot Hands, The Captain, and Satellite of You, as later released on CD on the Soft Bulletin Companion, and radio session versions of Up Above the Daily Hum, the switch that turns on the universe or turns off the universe, We Can't Predict the Future, and It Remained Unrealizable. So a total of 7 extra songs from the period. So if you think about the Soft Bulletin album here, so you've got the 13 albums plus the 7 extra songs, that's 20 songs, plus the 8 songs that went on Zaireeka, all recorded at roughly the same time. You have 28 songs from the band recorded in a very short kind of 18-month period. And the 5.1 mix was compiled from the original tapes in 2005 and then presented on the DVD. It's a banger of a surround mix with weird and unusual kind of blobby visuals that generally reflect the whole trippedly fucked off your box out of your brain and staring at the sun, thinking that you can fly kind of approach that the band's music has. Unlike, I think, some bands, they saw radio sessions as an opportunity for some extra free recording time to be paid for it, so they did some preparation in advance. Hence the radio sessions that are on the DVD version of the disc here are new and previously unreleased studio recorded Flaming Lips tracks, effectively secret B-sides that later got a release on the DVD. Absolutely fascinating, super prolific period. In my opinion, I think the Soft Bulletin is a bloody great record. I absolutely love it. I wish I remembered more of this period, and I wish I remembered liking the band more than I actually did. It was more that there was not very much time and not very much money and an awful lot of stuff that was going on around about the time this came out. So when I did hear it, I was kind of like, where's this music been all my life? It's absolutely brilliant. But as the Oasises sang, where were you while we were getting high? Well, I was doing a day job and having my heart broken and all the stuff that goes with it. But I'm glad that I got there, so I became a Flaming Lips fan probably around about 2001, 2002. Never looked back since then. I have had, on occasion, reasons to doubt my commitment to Sparkle Motion, and the Soft Bulletin is, I think, one of the finest LPs of the 1990s. I really, really recommend it. Give it a listen. It's like a modern day, updated, fully bonkers version of something, like some of those 60s concept albums where young people that were full of drugs and money genuinely thought that if they made the best record they possibly could, they might be able to solve world hunger, poverty, and create world peace. They came pretty close, and there is very little on the planet quite as euphoric as a Flaming Lips show when the band are running at full speed. But at the same point, that was then and this is now. So I'm going to wrap up here. Thanks. If you watched the whole thing, thank you for spending 47 minutes listening to me talk about the Flaming Lips. I think they are brilliant. Really, really enjoy it. This period has been very, very prolific, releasing lots and lots of material. And there's easily enough material across Zaireeka and the B-sides for an album that could easily be as brilliant and as sparkling and as vital as the Soft Bulletin. But it's all scattered across the places and shunted to the four corners of the earth. The Soft Bulletin is one of my favourite albums. I love it to bits. There are a few records that really detail to me what it is to be what it is to be human in 1999. And it tracks the same kind of universal themes that you would have in something like Dark Side of the Moon, which means it stood up to this day as a record that is as good now as it ever was. And that's where I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you for watching the whole thing. If you haven't watched the whole thing and skipped through bits of it, you've missed out on some real gold there. But actually, no, you probably haven't. And I will see you all hopefully soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. I am now going to go back to stroking cats. See you later. All right, bye.